Welcome. My name is Lisa Ashford. I'm CEO of Ethex. Welcome to Charging Ahead, a bright future for community energy. We will be running the webinar today for approximately 1 hour. Any participants can submit questions via the chat function, and we will attempt to answer those at the end of the session in a live Q&A session. Any questions that we don't get to, we will attempt to follow up post-event. So do get busy on the chat function. Thank you. And just to state as well, nothing on this webinar should be construed as a financial promotion. We can't answer any specific questions relating to anyone's personal financial circumstances. If you need any help, you can also speak to an ethical financial advisor who would be able to help you. So without further ado, let's kick off. So just to introduce myself again, I'm Lisa Ashford, CEO of Ethex. Ethex is a direct investment platform specifically focusing on impact. And over the last 10 years, we've raised around £80 million for community energy organisations and we're enabling individuals to align their money with their morals. So by investing directly, they can take action on climate change, build more resilient communities, and helping to create a fairer society. So let me introduce you to our panelists. So Olivia Blunn, who is Head of Local Net Zero Policy and Green Finance at the Department for Energy Security and Net Zero. Welcome, Olivia. Duncan Law, who is Head of Policy and Advocacy at Community Energy England, which is the main body that organises all of community energy across England. Welcome, Duncan. Hugh Goulburn, who is Director and General Counsel for CO2 Sense, who have been investing in community energy projects for the last 10 years and has a wealth of experience. Hi, Hugh. Also joining us, Robert Shrimp, founder of Solar for Schools. You'll know that Robert has hosted a number of offers over the last few years on Ethex, which has enabled hundreds of schools to put solar on their roofs. And we'll hear more about that later. Hopefully joining us in due course out in the field is Andy Held, who is Director of Energise Barnsley, who you may have noted recently was successful in a raise on Ethex to put solar panels on council housing in Barnsley. So let's get into it. So really interesting. There was a news article today which was outlining some of Jürgen Mayer's, who's the chair of GB Energy's comments at the this year's annual CBI conference, which talks about we need to take communities with us as we go about our journey towards net zero. So as important as getting to that target is, we also need to make sure that we do so in a fair and equitable way. And the Labour government has certainly put forward ideas on how to do that, and also how to really empower communities across the UK to play their part. And we're going to hear more about that. Olivia's here to first kick off our discussion to outline the government's vision for clean energy growth in the UK. Off you go, Olivia. Thank you.
Hi everyone, and apologies in advance. I'm calling in from quite a noisy office, but I've got my little headset on, so hopefully you won't get too much background noise. So I guess the way that I was going to sort of frame this piece was to give you a really broad kind of general picture overview about government's approach to net zero, and then I'll hone in on the community energy side of things. So just kind of generally, I think we've seen some really strong commitments from this government on net zero, particularly because they've committed to making Britain a clean energy superpower as one of its 5 priority missions. And that essentially means that government's committed to delivering clean power by 2030 and accelerating to net zero across the economy, whilst also, I guess, recommitting to the 2050 net zero target. And I think kind of within that and within our department, we're seeing the focus being on homegrown energy, renewable energy, reducing our exposure to fossil fuel markets outside of the UK. Big focus as well on protecting bill players in the kind of wider cost of living narrative that's happening at the moment. So basically strengthening our homegrown energy independence. And they've done quite a few quick things to demonstrate their commitment to this. So they've overturned the de facto ban on onshore wind pretty quickly. They've got some big commitments around expanding solar. They've created a Clean Power 2030 unit, I think it's called, which is led by Chris Stark, of course, previous chief exec to CCC. And the idea behind that there'll be like a top team of industry experts who are supporting the delivery of the 2030 clean power commitment. And of course, they've established Great British Energy, or committed to establishing it. And I'll talk more on that in a wee bit. And I think, kind of as you've said, Lisa, as part of this push to net zero, local government and also community groups are being seen as particularly important. Again, Great British Energy's local power plan, I'll come to that in a minute, but also to doing things like a devolution of greater powers to local government in England. So a real kind of, we want to empower and support local government and also communities to deliver and do more, which is a bit of a step change from the previous administration. So to turn specifically to community energy, as that's why we're here, I think so. They've been clear that community energy is important. They want to grow the sector, and it does play a key role in tackling climate change. The biggest kind of announcement or commitment they've made in this space is, of course, through Great British Energy's local power plan. And I guess the key headline takeaway about Great British Energy's local power plan is it will partner with community energy organisations and provide them with funding and support to roll out renewable energy projects with a view to developing up to 8 gigawatts of cleaner power. And this is going to be done alongside local and combined authorities as well. Now, I know loads of you will have loads of questions about the power plan. What does it mean in practice? When's it going to happen? When is all this support going to be, I guess, detailed out? And what I'll say to that is that we're still working through quite a few of the issues, really keen to get it exactly right, because basically this is going to set the precedent for growing the sector over the next few years. And as you'll all know, it's a very complex area. But I think what we have seen from ministers to date is a real keenness to get it right and to work with the sector to do that. We had a recent meeting of the Community Energy Contact Group, which was held with Minister Shanks, and he's the minister responsible for Great British Energy, to discuss the rollout of the local power plan and what it would actually mean for community energy groups. And sorry, for those that don't know, the Community Energy Contact Group is government's formal mechanism for engaging with the sector. It's got lots of representatives on, and we've got a web page that I can post in the chat about it. So I think it meets on a quarterly basis with officials to discuss some of the key policy and delivery issues that the sector is facing, and then also meets with ministers on an annual basis. Anyway, so we've discussed the LPP as part of that group, and I really hope that the wider sector's views have been translated to the minister on what exactly it will look like. And we really do hope to be able to say something more concrete on the local power plan shortly. So yes, so that kind of wraps up on the LPP, but kind of linked to that, I guess I'd like to highlight that this government has committed to carry on running the Community Energy Fund. So that was a £10 million fund that has been running for 2 years and is delivered through our local Net Zero Hubs programme, and enables both rural and urban communities across England, and it is England only, and I'll touch on Scotland and Wales in a moment, to access grant funding to develop local renewable energy projects for investment. And I think to date the fund has given funding to 154 community energy organisations, total valuing around £6.7 million. So almost at the end of that £10 million fund. And we know it's like really important to ensure that any transition to funding and support that is delivered through the local power plan is smooth, and that it transitions from the CEF to the local power plan funding. And so we're working really hard to ensure that we have that transition. Scotland and Wales. So basically, the community energy sector is like mainly a devolved issue for various reasons. And I know I deal with England only, but of course Scotland has its own support through CARES, the Community and Renewable Energy Scheme, and the Welsh Government's, I'm going to butcher this pronunciation, but the Uni Cymru programme. But yeah, I'm certainly not an expert in any of those two programmes, but wanted to recognise them. I think I've maybe got a few minutes left. Can I carry on? Okay, I'm getting a nod. So community energy sector, of course, we understand outside of renewable energy generation also does an awful lot. And I just wanted to touch briefly on energy efficiency, which, as we all know, is really important for the transition. So just to highlight, I guess, that government's committed around £3.4 billion over the next 3 years towards heat decarb and household energy efficiency. And as part of that, I think they've committed £1.8 billion to fuel poverty schemes. So we're seeing like lots of work within that space to government to roll out warm homes energy efficiency stuff, and partnering with local and combined authorities to do that. And I know just like generally that we're very keen to explore how we can get community energy organisations to work better with local authorities, because we know that there's real power in working together to deliver stuff. So that's definitely on our radar. I guess the final thing that I wanted to touch on was the community energy call for evidence. I think probably most of you will be aware that we published a call for evidence in the first half of this year, basically asking what are the barriers to the community energy programs and projects face when they're trying to be established, and what are the potential solutions to this. That closed during the summer. I think it was June sometime. So we've been busy working through the responses, which are very interesting. And we're seeing lots of the same issues come up on funding challenges, government policy being a big blocker, lots of inconsistency. We're seeing capacity and capability and skills gaps. And we're also seeing some kind of wider regulatory barriers, particularly around infrastructure and also planning. So lots of barriers that we're exploring. And I guess to reassure you that whilst we've yet to publish a formal response to the call for evidence, we are certainly using all the information that we got from it to feed into developing policy at the moment, and will of course publish a response to it soon. I think that was probably all I wanted to say for now, but like definitely happy to take questions when we get to the Q&A, and thanks for having me.
Yeah, great, Olivia. Thank you for kicking us off. That sets the right context. And welcome to Andy, who's joined us on site in Barnsley, I assume. And we'll come to you soon, Andy, so just hold fire there. So lots of questions coming in. I'm sure we will come back to those. So let's just move on. Duncan, you've been in the space for a long time. You've seen a lot of changes. You can give us an overview of where we are, what's been achieved, and you wanted to also present the community energy map. So let's just move straight to you, please, Duncan.
Surely. Can you all see my screen?
Yes.
Brilliant. Community Energy England is the voice of and the network for the sector. And you will notice that I've taken the question mark off the Charging Ahead a Bright Future for community energy, because we are incredibly positive about it. A quick overview: you've got the traditional model on the left, the ability to do renewable energy projects, wind and solar at West Mill Solar and Wind there, and that paying for other projects. Top right is South East London Community Energy, delivering £9 of social benefit for every £1 invested in their fuel poverty work. And bottom right, My Manor, Brixton Energy, the paid trainees there. Community energy is happening pretty well everywhere. There are areas of where it's happening less in North Yorkshire and in the East Countries, but it also does just about everything that has energy anywhere in its title. So all the renewable energy technologies, a lot of energy efficiency, a lot of organizations started that way, increasingly retrofit. People are incredibly entrepreneurial, and as it became more difficult to just install renewables, they branched out into energy efficiency advice during the energy crisis, transport, storage, flexibility, even doing local supply, which is kind of forbidden by regulation. That rooftop in Brixton is supplying energy at 6.3p per kilowatt hour to the social housing residents underneath the panels. It's also got huge expertise. These people have been entrepreneurial and now have the ability to know how to take advantage of local opportunities and meet local needs. And that is what we will be harnessing over the next 5 years. You can visit the map and see what's local to you and join in. A little bit of history. The sector grew exponentially between 2014 and 2017. Even as the support rates from government were dwindling. But as they were gradually cut off between 2019 and 2022, it became more and more difficult. In 2021, we managed 2.4% growth. But that is ramping up again now, and we can get back to exponential pretty soon. In that year, we increased employment in the sector by 40%, delivering real benefit on the ground. Here is a quick infographic from our State of the Sector report. A more detailed one will be coming out before the end of the year. Some important numbers in there: 4.4 million bill savings from the energy efficiency work, and large amounts of local money spent back into local economies. And a quick glance at potential: 74 stalled projects representing 270 megawatts of capacity. So once the brakes are taken off, there is existing capacity to build and huge ambition to go further. In 2020, we developed a 2030 vision to grow by between 12 and 20 times, contributing more than 5,000 megawatts of power, powering 2.2 million homes, supporting 8,000, nearly 9,000 jobs, saving 2.5 million tons of CO2 and adding nearly 2 billion to the economy. That was looking out of reach, but now it's back within our grasp. And that is hugely powerful and inspiring to all of us who are involved. Just as an example of some of the things that have happened and are happening at scale, this is the biggest turbine in the UK, in England, 150 meters at tip, 4.2 megawatts, delivering all its profits to benefit the disadvantaged community in Lawrence Weston in Bristol. And it was the only turbine, as far as I'm aware, that was put up in 2023 when it was virtually impossible to do onshore wind. And also in Bristol, the biggest community-owned rooftop at 1.1 megawatts. Sadly, Bristol Energy Co-op can't do the bigger projects that it wants to do because simply of grid constraints. But the government has committed to sorting those out, and people are working on it. And lastly, a beautiful example from South East London Community Energy. Irene stumbled into an energy cafe in Woolwich, and over the next 2 years, the relationship delivered her £1,667 a year of benefit, alongside a new boiler and all sorts of other benefits. So we are hugely optimistic. The government has pledged the biggest expansion of support for community energy in history. They recognise that it can really help with the transition, reducing pressure on the grid, which is hugely costly, saving families money, improving communities' energy security, helping tackle fuel poverty, and unleashing the dynamism and resources of local communities and winning the consent of local people, without which we simply will not achieve net zero. So there's everything to play for, and we'll do it. If you want to get in touch, please do, and do visit the national map. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Duncan. That is great. If you could just do a quick clarification for me, because a couple of questions coming in regarding Community Energy England versus UK.
Yes, we represent the sector in England, but we do a lot of the work that's government and Westminster facing. There is Community Energy Scotland and Community Energy Wales, and there is an organisation that represents in Northern Ireland. We do work closely together, but because they're devolved, they each engage with their own governments and their own enabling schemes.
Okay, so I can already see some follow-on webinars, so we can perhaps focus in more directly on Scotland and Wales, etc. So, okay, lovely. Thank you, Duncan. And I want to come back to you a bit later to talk about what are your top 3 things on your wish list that can really unblock that pipeline that you talked about. So if you could be thinking on that whilst we move on. So Andy, we have you. Let's take advantage of that if we can. If you'd like to give us a little introduction into your project, and I think you can probably follow on quite nicely with some tangible benefits and, you know, real life stories. So do go ahead.
Okay, thanks, Lisa, and pleasure to be here. I might rock back and forth. It's not because I'm about to fall off. It's a little bit parky. I'm outside with one of the residents who's benefited from our project, solar to begin with, now solar and battery. Now he's part of the solar and battery and community DSO project. So these residents, they're almost using 60% less electricity from the grid that they were 5-6 years ago. They've got a better understanding of local energy. And that's after we initially installed on 321 homes. We just raised the 3.2 million through Ethex to raise on another 1,000 through an innovative project with the local council. The local council and housing association are partners with us. They're one of the ones in 2015 didn't really have the expertise, and we didn't have any finance from them, but they gave us time. And then over that period, we've built on that relationship. Completed 3 innovation projects, been backed by the community as well. So, you know, our last raise, people are already investing in this. So it's good that there could be some low interest loans from government when they arrive in order for us to scale.
Great. Thank you, Andy. Appreciate that. Robert, we'll come to you next whilst we're talking about specific examples, and we'll then move back to Hugh. If you could go ahead, Robert. You're on mute.
As the name rather implies, we only focus on schools. The main reason being that we see that the impact of the education within those schools is even greater than the direct reduction of CO2 from those roofs. So we have a whole bunch of educational programs that we've developed over the years, from a mobile app that students can use to learn independently and teachers can monitor through a portal, all the way to connecting the data from the solar panels and the school consumption back into lesson plans around maths and physics to make it real. And we also then deliver education when we do the site visits. The kids love to fly the drone. And in fact, the picture behind me, they're just flying a drone and inspecting some roofs there. So we integrate the education into the whole process from the initial feasibility studies. So you can use our website, and students do this to put solar panels on the roof to see how much they could do. And in some schools, they have a bit of a competition, and the student who puts the closest number of panels on the roof to what we ended up building wins a small prize. We have various sort of bits of hardware that we can take into the schools too, such as a sort of small solar explorer kit, where they can play around and see what the impact is of a pretend shadow going across the solar panels. And also we talk about the various different jobs that they could do as they grow up. And we have a sort of whole bunch of job cards. And I was very surprised to see that videographer is a job that is involved with renewables. But that is the case because we want to spread the message and encourage more people to do it. We need to communicate the great stuff we're doing. Unfortunately, I'm wasn't meant to be presenting slides or videos, but I will post a link in the chat to our LinkedIn profile where you can, over the next few weeks, see a lot of videos, some of them produced by students themselves about that decarbonisation journey, and also from some of our investors. So I think the key point is that community energy allows us to fund these projects, but also involves the community in education. The students learn and then go back and tell their parents and teach their parents to then engage, who in turn might then invest in other projects. So it's a nice little synergistic virtuous circle.
Thanks, Robert. We love that ripple effect, creating the additional action from parents and beyond. And obviously on Ethex, we're all about supporting community energy and making sure that we've got this really vibrant community of people who are supporting all these organisations. In addition to CO2 Sense, Hugh, if you could give us a little summary about your experience of investing in community energy and why, and also I know you wanted to touch upon how heat and power needs to form part of the energy future.
Well, yeah, thank you, Lisa, and it's great to join this really interesting panel. And I'm sure I think I share, as many people on the call, Duncan's enthusiasm and optimism. I'm a director of CO2 Sense, as you said. We have been investing in this space for around 15 years. We were set up by the last Labour government in 2009-10 to invest at the risky end, I'd say, of community scale energy and technologies. As we've heard from Olivia, the local power plan is really critically important to the new government's clean energy and national wealth creation missions. I think, you know, we've got lots of enthusiasm, and I think Duncan's slides were really interesting in showing the kind of scale up and then slight stall, I think, and now hopefully we've got another scale up in this sector. And I think it's important to set it in a wider context, of course, of energy prices are still quite high for most consumers in the country. Government is committed to long-term investment, which may also increase price to some extent. And the confidence amongst general consumers in terms of energy, the new shift to the green technologies, you only have to look at kind of social media, listen to the radio airwaves to see that there is, you know, still some public lack of confidence, perhaps, around some of these new technologies. And so I think what the new government needs is probably quick and tangible wins early in 2025, 2026, so that it builds that confidence in the everyday experience of households and communities. And I guess we need to stop making clean energy to some extent look exclusive or expensive. And I know some of what Duncan and others have already said is exactly what community energy does for that. That's certainly been my experience. We've seen at CO2 Sense through all the investments we've made in hydro, solar, wind, anaerobic digestion, heat networks, as you've mentioned, and other things, that really, when you have that collective sense of community, it builds that confidence. You know, if I install a heat pump or a solar panel on my house with Octopus, and of course there are other energy suppliers out there, it creates discussion, but potentially also division in my street. Whereas if I install it with a community, and we all invest in local renewables, that creates trust and unity, and that inspires every street in our local area to get on the journey. Now, the challenge, and I think it'll be interesting to hear once the government has managed to collate its call for evidence, but the challenges we hear from local authorities, community groups, and others that we work with on community scale renewables is that there's the capacity issue, there's the finance, and I guess less the fact that there isn't finance out there, more how do you kind of put together a good project? How do you assess at an early stage whether it's a good or a bad project? And how do you take that out to secure a mix of blended finance? Now, we're a partner of the UK 100, so we hear these messages from local authority leaders. We've heard a lot, as Olivia said, from local authority leaders about perhaps a lack of capacity to deliver on the local power plan. They've certainly got the scale of ambition, but it's whether they have the capacity. We, of course, match fund with you, Lisa, through your platform. And so we've been talking to organisations like Andy's brilliant team at Energise Barnsley. And we know that there's lots of inquiries coming through from other communities who want to get on this and, again, are looking for capacity builders. And I suppose we can see some risks in terms of, obviously the planning changes are great, the local power plan monies are brilliant, but we don't just want all of these community assets taken over by private investors, because I guess it's plain common sense, as I was saying before, for local people to say, when my bills are going up, why is the wind turbine down the road not doing anything for me in terms of price? And so we share the view that there's real opportunity for the government to work with us and others in this sector, but we think we need to initiate a deal flow, a pipeline of community energy projects. We've already heard about the 74 stall projects, and so we think that government needs to work with us and other organisations to think about how we can unlock that. Now, I'm not sure I heard Olivia put a number to the investment, but I think we all think it's about £1 billion, don't we, in the local power plan. And so I guess what we might be saying is, let's say 100 million of that could be dedicated to capacity building, to development finance for local community-focused developers. That would mean flooding local communities with capacity, which would make good on the government's mission, not only on the clean energy mission, but also on its mission to share wealth equally across the country. And it would leverage the rich ecosystem of project developers like Andy's and others that we've been talking to, and financiers like ourselves and others like Thrive Renewables, Triodos and others, to bring a blend of finance into the space. We know there's existing community energy developers out there. There's not only Andy's group. Just this week, I was in Grimsby talking to Grimsby Community Energy, a fantastic group, want to take their model out and spread their capacity into the local area around North Lincolnshire and Humber. And if they could just draw down a little bit more through, say, development loans, that would enable them to do that. And so we see an opportunity for us and others like us to work alongside government, to draw down some of these monies. We're already set up. We could already deploy it quite quickly alongside some of our monies, to structure community energy pipelines that can attract a blend of finance. And in some cases, of course, that would mean community shares that you offer through your platform and community bonds. But we also think that there's money that could come in through, say, private equity. When we developed our 0.5 megawatt wind turbine in Mid Wales, we did it as part of a pipeline of projects, 3 of which we sold off to private equity, which then meant we could build out that one asset. And I think that's a model that could be used across the community energy sector, more to bring in a blend of private finance. Essentially, government, just as we at CO2 Sense have done for over a decade, would therefore be providing the risk capital to enable all of us to work out how we can deliver community energy at scale. And Duncan, I think, pointed out in his slides the scale of the opportunity if we can really ramp this up and scale it up. And importantly, as Duncan also mentioned, and I think Andy and others have mentioned, there are other technologies that are a little bit stuck at the moment, things like anaerobic digestion and hydro, which I think if we could get a little bit more development capital, as I'm talking about, into the system, we could start to unlock. And this is particularly important for some of those rural areas that the map showed are not yet covered. Let me close, because we want to get into the Q&A where I started. We at CO2 Sense see this, like Duncan and others have, Olivia and others have said, as a moment of incredible opportunity for this sector. It's great that we're no longer talking about if the scale up of community energy is going to happen, but how and when it's going to happen. That's a really good shift in the discussion. Of course, the public mood provides an incentive and an imperative for all of us to move fast, to try things and see what works and then scale it up. So let's not look at the problem for too long. Let's just start to try some things and get things moving. We have lots of case studies. I know you do at Ethex. We have models we can share. We look forward to working with everyone on this call and in the wider community energy sector to make this happen. Thank you, and I look forward to the wider discussion.
Thanks, Hugh. Appreciate that. So some questions coming in, and I think we have sort of two sides of the equation here. We've got what can be done on the pipeline side of things to really accelerate and unblock to create more projects, which Duncan, I'd love to just come back to you in a second to just outline that. And then I think there's also questions coming in around, well, what can be done to encourage and enable individuals to invest more and become members of these community benefit societies, which I can talk to in a little bit. Great to talk about blended finance models, and I think we all can agree that there won't be one solution here, that it will be a layered model where we'll need different forms of finance for different times and for different purposes throughout the sort of evolution of a community energy project, or even just that very initial capacity building right at the start. There's quite a lot of peer learning already happening with community energy, actually, and finance going to some of these organisations that can help to get new projects and communities up and running. But we've obviously got to really accelerate that to get to where we want to. So Duncan, you know, we heard from Olivia around the community energy contact group, which I'm sure some of the members from Community Energy England have they've spun out from that. So perhaps you could give us some of the, you know, what are the top 3 issues that they want the government to try and address?
Thank you. Yes, my shopping list. The first one is clarity around the beginning of the local power plan and the transition from the Community Energy Fund, which Olivia mentioned. I know that's in the pipeline, and it's not easy, but it's really important because we've got momentum behind us, and what we can't afford to do is stall. It's happened on so many occasions before with the ending of the Rural Community Energy Fund, where projects stalled and excellent people who were working in the support services in the net zero hubs just went off and got other jobs. So we need to keep the momentum going forward. That also needs to be looking longer term at how we finance projects after the Community Energy Fund and after the local power plan loans for community have to be repaid. And tax relief will be a really important part of that. So that's going to be probably a slightly long-term argumentation with this government. I would say collaboration with everybody, but particularly local authorities who are getting also a big support from the local power plan is going to be absolutely fundamental. And that's got to be built into Great British Energy and into the local power plan. And finally, if you only give me 3, it's local supply and enabling of local markets, because it's the joined up program projects locally which connect the local generation with local demand and enable that to be done flexibly and creatively, which is going to take the pressure off the grid, which is going to build the local interconnections, the local creative solutions that help localize our energy system, which is the only way we will actually achieve the net zero strategy, net zero transition in time.
Thanks, Duncan. Olivia, did you want to respond to that? And then I'll talk a bit more about, you already mentioned tax relief, Duncan, but let's just come back to that in a second. Olivia?
Hey, yeah, definitely. I mean, we're well aware of like everything that Duncan has just described. We've been talking about it for a long time, and definitely through the community energy contact group. What I would say is, like, from a government perspective is, as I said, completely understand there needs to be like a smooth transition, but most importantly, no break between the Community Energy Fund and what new support is doing. And we're really working hard to ensure that. And I feel pretty confident that we will achieve that. Without saying anything like super substantive, I'm hopeful that that will be possible. And then I guess just like on the broader sort of like capacity and capability building points that have been raised, that I get. Again, I did also want to come back on and say I completely agree. We see the same with local authorities, as we've mentioned before. Like, yes, isn't it wonderful? There's you know, all this funding to invest in, and we hear that from investors all the time. Like, they're keen to invest, they want to, but there's no pipeline of projects that they can invest in. And so we really understand that we need the development capital to be able to build that pipeline. It's what the Community Energy Fund is trying, and I think has successfully done through funding for things like feasibility studies for building out business cases. But we know that that needs to go further and do more if we're going to build that pipeline. Was there anything else specifically that you wanted me to come back on?
Any of those points, Duncan, or should we just, let's look at the investor sort of perspective. You know, how can we scale up the capital that we need to actually deliver these projects? I mean, I think from our perspective, we're very keen that government money should come in at the right points in the pipeline. So very much at the early risk end. There's lots of projects that require capital for development. That might be in relation to planning, that might be in relation to grid connection. That is the type of risk which isn't suitable necessarily for community members to bear. And if government can come in and help bolster that, then it means that the projects can go ahead a lot quicker and smoother, and then we can help with the job of raising the finance from members of the community and broader across the nation. The many people who invest in multiple community energy projects because they think it's just such a good thing to do, where they can really sort of take action on climate change. And as we know, using your money for good is one of the most effective ways actually of taking action on climate change. But coming to you, Robert, and then Andy, we all were around probably in the early days when there were feed-in tariffs, where there was EIS tax relief, which enabled the first, I suppose you could call it, boom of community energy projects, and has actually lent to the establishment of these bigger community energy organizations that are award-winning, multi-project, and doing some of the real cutting-edge innovation. So what is it from your side which is really, and you can talk about the project side as well, what are the things that you would like to see change? Let's go Robert, then Andy.
It's a very broad question. I think we're always trying to balance and I'm trying to answer some of the questions in the chat at the same time to some extent. The rate that we offer funders or bondholders or shareholders in a community benefit society to deliver on a project versus the savings or the benefit that community group will then deliver to that society or that community. And one of the funds I find challenging is that whilst we find a certain number of very proactive bondholders who invest time and time again with us to help more schools, and we're currently sort of offering 5.5%. As soon as you then go beyond sort of individual social impact investors and you start going into institutional funds or even sort of family offices or impact funds, they expect to get a higher return than that. And I found that sort of always quite difficult. You expect a sort of parent or grandparent to be happy with 5.5%, yet a family office or an institutional fund wants 6 or 7%. Which then obviously reduces the impact. So I think trying to weigh the impact versus the financial return is sort of a tricky one in this market space. We're not really fully commercial. We're not really fully impact. It's sort of halfway gray area, and that's quite difficult, I think. In terms of balancing it, I think someone mentioned that someone's offering 10%. I haven't seen any community projects offering anywhere near 10%, 5 to 6%. And we would like to offer more, but if you offer more, less projects are viable. And I think there's not a huge understanding that 1% extra on an interest rate to an individual doesn't really move the needle, but it actually makes a massive difference to a project. It makes a difference between it happening or not. So that then goes back to how do you encourage more people to invest in this? I think in order to attract enough funding at low cost and sensible return to investors, what we do is we try and partly fund it through grants. So that provides like an equity buffer or grant buffer to protect bondholders. So I think it's a case of risk reward. I think a lot more people would be interested in doing these projects if they were pretty confident that they won't be able to lose their money at 5%. Yeah. And there is a small risk with these projects. I think very few projects have failed completely, but there is a risk and an unknown. I'm always amazed by how few people have ever heard of a community benefit society or a co-op. Yes, I know there's over 300 in the UK, but the vast majority of people I talk to have never heard of one. So I think there's a communication thing, and I think there's a huge opportunity for possibly the government to just advertise this sort of alternative investment model to encourage more people to consider putting money, a small amount of their funds, into community energy groups.
Yeah.
Well, the total is amount across it, but it's still I mean, we're talking, at least it's done an amazing job raising 80 million. But most fund managers, commercial institutional fund managers, 80 million is a rounding error to the sort of billion that they manage. So the whole sector is still attracting a very, very, very small portion of the total amount out there. And so educating them would be a great way to get there. I think educating them on the balance too.
Yeah, I think there is, there's a lot of movement in the same direction here. There's, government talking about really bolstering the cooperative sector, which would also reflect a lot more visibility, perhaps, for people of what we try to do. And I completely agree. There is a communication thing here, and we want to be a credible, if you want to put it in professional terms, asset class, and community shares and community bonds need to have much better exposure, and to be taken seriously as a really good option. And there's a connectivity point there, isn't there, between place-based investing and institutional investing and pensions, and what can be born within different instruments, because we want to be more connected, but there are a number of challenges. Andy, coming to you, just to try and keep you warm and alive on the streets of Barnsley, tell us, any other further comments to Robert there, and then we'll address some of these questions in the chat, which are coming through thick and fast.
No worries. I'll do the first on finance, and just a little bit specific to us on the local power plan, local energy. On finance, it's the first time we used the innovative finance offer through your platform this year, and found, I think, 50 or 60% people invested through it. Brilliant. That came in recently, simple to use. People get a tax wrapper, big tick. For the low interest loans coming out with GB Energy, we're ready. The community have committed. Unsecured lending at 6%. We're ready for £1 million to come into our project, and we would like a pilot of a CO2 sense, a redress, and perhaps a charity bank, people who are energy specialists with finance, to have 10 million each, so you can get the process right, and we can get it into a lead project like us, which ticks all the metrics they want. So that's specifically on finance. In terms of local power, I'm standing here outside with my phone to the hotspot to this. Tech is all available. It's social science part which is failing. So beneath me, the copper wires, when you're doing local grid, it's not big enough. The connections teams at every DSO, DNO, it needs a complete revamp, because we haven't been smart to what we've connected locally. And now we want to balance behind the local grid. So our emphasis there is perhaps to fund the ability to be able to connect more local outcome technologies in a way which is beneficial and just to everyone. And then also, but one of the most exciting things for us is a couple of Elexon changes, particularly one with the virtual lead party, and be able to have exported non-fit solar to a third entity like ours, Energise Barnsley. The virtual lead party one's exciting because we've never wanted for our tenants and our projects to change supplier. We've never forced them onto one. We don't want to retain that choice. But all of a sudden, you can do things which are net zero, local benefit, aggregation through our batteries here, and be able to offer a different income stream to tenants like they have in Europe. Some have two different bills. So we see a lot of progress there. But it's commercial, and like community energy has always adapted to commercial progress. We've always innovated. So I lump more dialogue. I want a bit more speed, particularly to get the money out the door. And also on money out the door, I've had a failure of a project. It's the biggest learning curve ever. That's why Energise Barnsley is so successful, due to the one which didn't happen for all the right reasons. So when you do have an entity which is pushing loans out, you've got to have a recovery desk on there, because some of the loans won't work. And then you've got to help those community energy societies, co-ops to get out the situation, and then keep your loan fund ticking over, and to be able to go and fund others. So that's the view from sunny South Yorkshire.
Thanks, Andy. Good. So coming on to some specific questions. There was a question here around energy efficiency, and are we building into this energy use reduction when we're talking about energy efficiency?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, the two are almost the same things, but sometimes if you make a house more efficient, people just live hotter for the same amount. But there are all sorts of benefits to them doing that, health and well-being and so on. But yeah, energy reduction is absolutely fundamental to community energy organizations. It's at the top of the energy hierarchy. We should, like we do with waste, reduce, and then I address how we can supply what we really need renewably and locally. It's at the heart of everybody I talk to, and it is a no-brainer. It delivers benefit immediately, and it delivers it forever. If you do energy efficiency, the returns on investment are compounding and eternal. And also it delivers more carbon savings very often for per pound than the renewable energy, which in many cases is funding them. So it's fundamental to the work of the sector.
One side, we've discovered that when we put solar on a school and provide the school with accurate visual measurements of it and incorporate that into the education piece, on average across our portfolio of nearly 190 schools, they've reduced their electricity consumption by 25%. That's not the solar, that's just them being aware of how they were using it and going, oh my God, we could have switched all that off. So yes, energy efficiency, and in our case is an extra bonus byproduct, but it is very important.
Yeah, thank you. Olivia, this is a question for you. Is DESNZ supporting the local electricity bill?
Big question. Well, as far as I'm aware, the local electricity bill is not currently live in Parliament at all, but it was certainly last year and probably the year before that, and we've done an awful lot of work on it. I suppose it's a tricky and it's a complex area. I think the department recognises that local energy supply, of course, is a really important part of our energy system. We know that some suppliers do already offer local tariffs, and other products and services are also available that provide community benefits. We know that small-scale generation sites can benefit from an Ofgem exemption, which means that they don't require a licence. We know that Ofgem has further flexibility as well to award supply licenses to generation sites that are above the exemption threshold when they are restricted to a specific local area. So I'm just kind of like throwing facts out at the moment. But I would say that Ofgem has actually published a consultation recently on innovation in the retail market, which basically aims, I think, to progress a sort of conversation on the key barriers and enablers of retail innovation. The consultation itself really focuses, I guess, on how you can help to enable new innovative products and route to markets. So I would encourage people to look at that consultation because it's also looking specifically at local and small scale generation. So in short, the local electricity bill isn't live at the moment, so there's nothing. As far as I'm aware, I might have missed something. I have been on 3 weeks leave, lucky me. But as far as I'm aware, it's not live, so there's nothing to support or not support at the moment. But I think generally the department's position on local supply is as I've just laid out.
Thanks, Olivia. Hugh, I think you wanted to come in there.
Yeah, I was just picking up one of the questions in the chat because I saw there was a couple of questions related to private equity and other bits and pieces. And I think it links back to the conversation we had before about the blended finance and how the opportunity for, I guess, community share offers and community bonds to scale. I mean, the point has been made by yourself, Lisa, that it's still a small, thin end of the wedge, right? And I suppose in the absence of yet be able to scale up to the amounts of money that are needed, then I think that we have to look at other potential investor pools. It's not to say that private equity can necessarily come into community share or cooperative structure. It's just more that we've seen opportunities to, say, take a portfolio of projects and say let a couple of them be developed out by private equity so that we had then the capital to invest in the other ones. But ultimately, it'd be great to get to a place where it's all done by community share and owned by the community. I think then, just to pick up on Andy's point, as I said in my first, I think definitely pace. I agree with you, Andy. I think there's a pace point here. I can understand why government would want to try things perhaps next year and see how they work. I mean, we're very open to working on a pilot project. We have some capital we can invest alongside government as well to do that, to sort of pilot this and see if we can get some projects underway and start to cut into that pipeline of projects that could get going, and then report back, see how it's going, to test it, see if there's things that aren't working or things that could work better, and help government to deliver on that alongside some others. I think the final point I would probably make in all of this is, let's not forget that even if it is £1 billion, that really isn't going to be enough if it's done over 5 years. Even if it's 5 billion over 5 years, that just will never be enough to do all of this. So it's to build out all the local authority assets, all the community energy assets. So we do need to bring in that blended finance, and so we have to find innovative ways, as you said, Lisa, of using government money to unlock the risk elements and then bring in other finance on top of that at the back end. So yeah, those would be my points at this stage. Thank you.
Thank you. And just following up on some of the questions in the chat, perhaps I could make a more general point. Someone's made a question regarding the FCA consultation on cooperatives and cooperatives' role within the community energy sector. Without going into detail there, I suppose what I would want to try and emphasize is policy really requires joined up thinking between multi-agencies, and the FCA is one of those agencies, and currently, you know, there are a number of challenges if we want to grow the sector and we want to grow the number of people that are involved. Then we really need to think about that in the round. You know, Treasury, tax incentives, FCA, structures, compliance, regulation, government. Where's the money coming from? Where's it going? How can it form the most efficient route to get to projects like Robert and Andy at the right points in the community energy journey. So we are coming to time. So I just wanted to give Olivia just a last chance to just round out and give her last closing comments, and then I will thank all the panel for their contributions.
Wow, okay, closing comments. Well, I think to keep it very, very brief, I think the new administration's been super clear, very positive on net zero, very positive on renewable energy generation, and very positive on local government and community involvement in that transition. I think it's a real opportunity for us to harness that enthusiasm and to grow the sector. And I think it's a really exciting time, having worked in this for a while now under different administrations. I think it's a really exciting opportunity for us to do stuff, but also for us to get it right and to not rush things. So looking forward to continuing to work with the sector through the Community Energy Contact Group and see what the next year or so is going to bring.
Yeah, thank you, Olivia, and thank you, everyone. Really appreciate your contributions and everybody listening in as well. We'll try and address any questions that are outstanding, and I feel like there may well need to be a follow-up quite soon where we can talk about the specifics and really get into the detail and make sure that we're talking geographically around the country as well, so bringing in more of what's happening in Scotland and Wales as well. So Thanks, everyone. Great to see you all. And let's talk again soon. Thank you.